because I have a hard time not doing it when I'm around Southern folk.
Well, I was gonna say I'm
it's all good.
from. Your wife is from like maybe 30 minutes away from where I live. So if you guys are ever in town, let me know and we'll go get some good food somewhere and we'll hang out and enjoy the coastline.
Oh, guaranteed. Yeah, if we get down there anytime soon. The hard part's been that she doesn't really have any relatives anymore. She got some old farts that live out in the shack somewhere, but nobody's close to anybody on that side of the family. But everybody who she would have normally visited all the time every year, where we'd go out there to see them all the time, ended up moving out west, so we haven't been down there forever. But if we get down there, we'll definitely look you up, dude.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Let's go ahead and get this thing started. All right.
I'm sharing it to Facebook real quick.
Okay. Let you do that. I got it up on Twitter.
I'm not sending you video. You want video from me?
Only if you want to. No biggie.
I totally can. Let me hit the lights. Hang on a second.
Okay. Dude, I saw Disaster Artist this week, and I saw Shape of Water. Have you seen those yet?
I want to see both. I want to see both of those really badly.
God, Shape of Water is so good.
It's what I've heard. I've heard it's amazing.
If it doesn't win Best Picture, I'm out. I don't care anymore.
That'll be it.
That is all.
Let's see. I still
There's
don't have any
video. I think it's working.
There we go. I see
bright.
Scott.
There we go. Do you see that?
Yep, I see you.
Right on.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to see The Shape of Water pretty fierce. I haven't had a chance yet, but I'm
so
excited
good.
to.
It's definitely not for the kids. It's got some nudie boobs in there, and some butts.
What are those?
Nudie boobs.
Nudie boobs and nudie butts.
It's my favorite candy when I was a kid. I get a box of nudie boobs.
Yeah.
The best.
All right, well, here we go. If you guys are ready.
I love Del Toro. I can't wait. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. Now you get me all excited.
All right, in 3, 2, 1. This episode of the Nerd Cave Retro is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nerdcave. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Oops, I played that. Oh, shit. Damn it. Let me start over again. Damn it. Damn it, I forgot to play the music.
Take 2.
This episode of the Nerd Cave Retro is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nerdcave. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
You're listening to the Nerd Cave Network.
Greetings, programs, and welcome back to the Nerd Cave Retro Show. My name is Jason Robbins.
And I'm Derek Diamond.
And embarrassing myself with the new soundboard in front of our very important guest tonight. We actually have, we've had a pretty good list of guests that we've had on this show, Derek. We had Mr. Joey Image. We've had Tom Merritt. We've had Brian Dunaway. We've had the Podfather, Paris Lilly. And now we have the Grand Poobah of podcasting. As a guy, I'm going to tell a little bit of story here before we go into my introduction. Well, this is my introduction for him, but in 2007, from 2006 to 2009, I was a really big WoW player. Like, World of Warcraft was my life for about 3 years. And I first got into podcasting like right around 2007. And you know how when you first get into podcasting, you start downloading like everything you're interested in, and you kind of go through this like a period of listening to everything, and then you kind of whittle stuff down to like your favorite stuff. Well, one of the shows that I listened to that I loved because I was trying to find video game podcasts, and I came across this show called The Instance. and it was this guy named Scott Johnson out of Utah and Randy Jordan. And it was a really well-produced show. Like, you know, most podcasts, especially, you know, still you can find some podcasts like this, but especially like around 2007 or so, most podcasts sounded like it was a dude sitting inside of a tin can, and they were awful and just sounded like crap. But this show, well, like, had, you know, sounded like you could hear it on the radio. Like, it had really fun guests and segments, and, you know, they had interviews with actual WoW developers and stuff. And I was like, who is this dude, Scott Johnson, man? So I go online and look him up, and I find that he's a web cartoonist. I'm like, these are awesome. Like, I want to do this. Like, I didn't know web cartoons existed at that point. It was like this whole new world opened up to me. And at that time, you know, from about 2005 to 2010, I was diagnosed with depression, clinical depression and anxiety and stuff, and was looking for things to kind of get me out of that funk. And, you know, my wife came along, and she had seen some of my artwork that I did back in like the 90s and stuff, and I had stopped doing. Well, she got me a big art set, and I started doing cartooning again. And then I found, you know, all of Scott's stuff online, and then I wanted to do, you know, a web comic and everything like that. And looking at his videos online of how he does his stuff, like digital stuff, it was just like, you know, I really looked up to this guy. And today, you know, I've been on Current Geek a couple of times, and if you listen to his shows, he's got the Morning Stream, Current Geek, Film Sack, the Boop Show, the Instance Core. I struggle to do 2 shows a week. I don't know how Scott does as many shows as he does, but he's my favorite podcaster in the world, and the man that I look up to. And he makes me want to be, you know, that much better when I listen to him every day. So here he is, Mr. Frog Pants himself, Mr. Scott Johnson.
Well, that's the nicest stuff I've ever heard anybody ever say about me ever. So that was really nice, man. I super appreciate that. I hope I can somehow live up to the to that image today on this show and not completely blow it for you guys. But I'm excited to be here for a couple of reasons. One, I think you're a pretty rad dude too, and when you asked, it was like a no-brainer. It's like, yep, let's totally make this happen. But 2, you guys talk about the kind of stuff I'm way into, so this was like an easy pick for locking down some time and doing an extra show, which isn't always that easy for me. I get crazy schedule stuff going on. It's hard for me to do other shows. I love guesting when I can, but it's hard. So this was a chance for me to guest on a show that sounds like it's right up my alley. So Thank you for having me. And I don't feel like I live up to any of that stuff you said, but I'll take it as a compliment anyway. So thank you for that.
Well, it's really cool because I've found that this show here is the easiest show I've ever done to get guests for. Like, Derek, I don't know about you, because Derek does a podcast himself called The Derek Diamond Experience, where, you know, he got the voice for Mario last week, which was a great show, by the way.
You're too flattering, Jason. No, it's definitely tough, you know, with trying to schedule guests and, you know, trying to fill content. So I can only imagine what you go through, Scott.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. I mean, I've been doing this long enough where, I don't know, I've got some tricks now. It's not as hard as it used to be, and I love doing it so much that I don't really even think about it anymore. Like, I just do the stuff I do. The hardest thing I do is probably the thing I enjoy the most right now, which is I do a morning show every day for 4 days a week, plus a 5th episode later on Fridays. And that turned out to be the hardest, most work-related thing I've had to do in podcasting, but the most rewarding by far. Like, I'm having so much fun with that thing. And people are always like, how do you do that 5 days a week? I'm like, I don't know. How do you listen to it 5 days a week? I don't know how people do anything. So for me, it's, you know, it's all a matter of degrees. But, you know, you do this long enough and you start to, even though I still feel like we're all just sort of exploring new territory and we're hacking down, you know, trees with our virtual machetes, trying to figure out what's behind them. And we don't really know. But you do this long enough and you start to figure out ways around stuff. So it's all good.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Yeah,
that's very true.
I do have a pretty cool story from this weekend, a retro gaming story that, you know, my brother, my brother went off to college in 1992, my first year of high school. And, you know, the Super Nintendo came out in 1991. and I got it that Christmas in 1991. And then, my brother moved off to college in 92. And, he went 4 years of college to 96, graduated, and then he moved off to Daytona immediately after graduating. So the last time me and my brother lived under one roof was, 26 years ago now. And, he's got his family and everything. Well, he came down this weekend for a visit, and he came over to the house. And it's very rare that my brother gets we just get to hang out, together as brothers. Because he's got the family and everything, other than like holidays and stuff. Well, he came over to the house, and first time he's been here in 4 or 5 years to my house, and I was showing him my video game setup and everything, and I said, I got something I got to show you. And I hooked up the Super Nintendo. I put in Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, and I still had his save file from 1992 on there.
That's awesome.
That's great, man. I don't know. I wouldn't know where to find any of that crap.
Yeah, he was quite blown away by that, and we sat in here and played Link to the Past for a bit yesterday, and that was fun.
Yeah, I'll tell you what bums me out. This is actually what bums me out a little bit, is I don't have, like, at the time it seemed like the right thing to do, but every time a new console would come out, I'd go, oh, well, the only way I can justify buying an N64 is I need to get rid of my SNES and my Genesis. And then when I can't remember what came next for me, probably the Saturn or something. But whenever something new would come out, I would always want it and get it, but I'd feel guilty if I didn't try to sell the previous thing. And so none of it occurred to me that I would one day be mad that I didn't collect it all. And I am so regretful of that. Like, to this day, it irritates the crap out of me that I still don't have an N64 that I originally owned, or don't have an originally owned everything all the way back to an NES. Like, I thought all that stuff needed to move on and make room for the new. And it was just the wrong move, man. I would love to have all that stuff, like, either not even hooked up, just display it someplace, or say, oh my gosh, look at this stack of crap over here. I mean, I have enough crap, and so this is probably double-edged sword, but there are days I wish I could go down that road.
Yeah,
no, I'm in exactly the same boat. I sold all my old, NES, SNES, N64, all that stuff. I've been rebuying it, but I still wish I had that original version that I owned as a kid.
Mm-hmm. I still have my original NES and Super Nintendo. I was never going to get rid of those. Of course, I don't know if you can kind of see my Super Nintendo there behind me. It's got that kind of brownish tint to it now that all the Super Nintendos do after they've been exposed to salt air for 30 years. And I used to be really OCD about my game boxes, and I used to keep all of my game boxes, not with the games, but I would take the games out, put them on my shelf, and then I would take the boxes and keep them up in my closet. I wouldn't throw anything away as a kid, but for some reason, all those boxes are missing. Either my mom threw them away, or sometime in the past, a couple of decades or whatever. But I really wish I still had all those boxes from the games that I had, because my entire collection, I would still have the boxes to everything. And I even still had the Super Nintendo box up until a couple of years ago. And for some reason, I let my wife talk me into throwing it away.
Oh, man.
That's a bummer, dude.
Let that be a lesson to you, kids.
Yeah.
And you never know. Like, I just didn't, I don't know. I just didn't think of it that way. And my kids are now like, Dad, why'd you do it? And I'm like, well, part of it was for you guys. I was like getting the new things. We could all play, Ocarina of Time. And you didn't know, you were 6 or whatever. And, or 5 or 4, whatever they were at the time. And so they've got all this artificial anger that I didn't keep all that stuff. But at the same time, I don't know. We live in this crazy slap together video game world now where, I don't know, 10 years ago, if you'd have told me I'd have 900 games ready to play on a PC for no good reason, I'd say you were full of it. If you'd have said I'd have a Nintendo device I could carry around with me and play in bed and download, old games, new games, indie games too, I'd have said you were crazy. Like, we are in a renaissance period, and I don't know if we appreciated it enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all hindsight being 2020, I should have collected that stuff. The truth is, all of it I can play again on RetroPies or a million other ways to get them. I can get on eBay and find me a SNES. I can do all this sort of stuff. But I'll never get back. Like, I owned what's that Genesis offshoot thing? It was called the CDX.
Yeah.
You guys probably know this thing.
Yeah.
Sega CD, Genesis, all in a small, like, CD player size thing. They were very shortly lived. They were barely on the shelves. I bought one, went into debt for that stupid thing. And I don't know why I sold it. That should be right over there on the shelf. I'm so annoyed that it's not. But I am happy we live in a time where, you know, all this stuff is pretty much at our fingertips. Yeah. And I can go from AAA to retro in 5 seconds. I'm glad Nintendo has embraced this with their 2 recent releases of their classic consoles. There's a few things I'd do different if I were them, but for the most part, I think that's a positive bit of movement. So I don't know, man. I feel like this is a good opportunity on the show tonight for me to pinch myself and remind myself just how rad we have it as gamers right now. It's incredible.
And that's Absolutely. The thing, you know, when I was a kid, you know, in the time of the original Nintendo, you know, I was just you know, from between the ages of like 9 and 12, you know, I was playing hardcore NES, and you know, you wanted a game, it was $50. You know, whether it was a good game or a bad game, each game was $50. So, you know, you only got 1 or 2 games a year, birthday and Christmas. So it wasn't like you could go online and you know, a 99-cent app on the smartphone, you know, like has more power than the Nintendo had at the time. And you know, that you can get, like you said, emulators. You can go online and get every single Nintendo game ever made for like, you know, and put it on a 1 gig, you know, little thumb drive or something, and it's all right there. And you know, people talk to me a lot about, you know, retro game stuff, and they wonder why I spend so much time hunting stuff down and not just getting in emulators, because you know, there's something about the thrill of the hunt. You know, when you're looking for something in particular. You know, like I'm still on the hunt for like. You know, Zombies Ate My Neighbors and things like that. You know, I could easily go online and find an emulation of it, but there's not going to be the same feeling as when I finally get that copy that I've been looking for, you know, and pop it into the original Super Nintendo.
There's an authenticity to doing that, to finding authentic stuff, and that's getting harder and harder to do. That stuff is, it's funny because as we enter a digital age where everything is infinitely copyable, you see industries like, a good example would be comic books. Comics are great, and everyone still loves comics, and comics are great. But we are done with the days where a limited number of prints were made with of a Kiss comic, and Gene Simmons' real blood is in there, and you know, like, if you have one of those, it's worth a lot. Or somebody found a Detective Comics jammed in the back of a house someplace, and now that's worth $50,000 or whatever. Those days are gone from a certain time forward. It's about the mid '90s. It doesn't matter what you bought, when you bought it, no matter how popular that comic was, it doesn't matter, or even how unpopular it was, they don't sell for jack. And why? Because that stuff's all digital now, and there's not as much interest in that authenticity because, again, it's just ubiquitous. It's just there's no reason to call it a collector's item anymore. Yeah. What's weird is video games are kind of folding back the other way. I thought this would go completely the opposite. If you're just looking to play it, you can emulate anything. You can pirate anything, you can hack anything, you can legally get stuff and have it be pretty accurate. That SNES Classic is a great example of, you know, a really high quality but ultimately emulated experience. So it's funny because video games have gone the other way. Now it's really valuable for you to go find the rare Ocarina of Time gold cartridge with full manual and case still intact or whatever. Like, they're having a resurgence in that popularity, and those prices go up on the antiquity of video game stuff. And that includes consoles, that includes rare and hard to get games. People go to Japan like on a pilgrimage just to find weird stuff in a bin. Like, I love that. I love that games have figured out a way, despite the complete digitization of that world, they figured out a way to do it. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. So yeah. Shows like yours obviously talks a lot about this and supports this whole space, but no one saw that coming. Whereas music, video, a million other formats, totally the other direction. Well, video honestly, games, while very digital, and if you're just trying to play, look, if I just want to play Donkey Kong 3, and by the way, Donkey Kong 3 is rad, and anyone who tells me different can suck it. I mean, I realize it's a weird game and it probably shouldn't exist in the canon of the series, but it's a pretty fun game. Anyway, I always look fondly on Donkey Kong 3, but, you know, there's something about, do I just want to play Donkey Kong 3 or do I want to own a piece of history? Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is go find that card someplace and stick it in an NES and play it.
Well, I was going to say, you know, you bring that up. I was actually, it was an article I read. I don't remember where it was, but it was about the popularity of the Nintendo 64 the last couple of years. You know, retro shops saying that they just can't keep them in stock, especially around the holidays, because people are buying up every Nintendo 64 that they can find, because everybody, you know, loved that console. But not only that, but it was one of the only consoles where you could play 4-player right there without having any sort of like, you know, peripheral to have to play, you know, plug in other controllers and stuff. It was the ultimate party console where you could play Mario Kart 4-player, you know, Mario Party and things like that. So it's, you know, its popularity is actually starting to go on the rise. And I'm wondering, you know, we've talked about this, Derek, if they're going to do, you know, in Nintendo 64 Mini anytime soon. I think it might be coming sooner than we think because of the popularity of the console itself.
I think so too, and you know, like you said, it's something that we have talked about, and we've both said that it might happen in, you know, 2019 or 2020. But I won't be shocked if, you know, in the next few months we hear it might come out as soon as this Christmas. I don't see why not, because the NES. I mean, we've documented the failure that Nintendo had with keeping those things in stock, but the NES sold really well. The SNES sold really well. There's no reason the N64 won't sell well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing I can think of with the N64 that may hold it back, and maybe this changes with time, because, you know, I remember the shift to 3D when the 64 and the PSX or the PlayStation came out. There was this real sense of, ooh, big major change. Everything's going polygonal. We're going 3D. We're getting away from sprites and all of that. And Sega struggled to keep up because really the Saturn originally started as a really awesome 2D capable machine, and they had to kind of retrofit it to sort of make 3D come out of that thing, but it was pretty bad. You know, they kind of got it right with the Dreamcast, but by then the writing was on the wall. But anyway, the point is that those early attempts at 3D were really, really cool for their time. But if you look at them now,
they're a little rough.
A little rough, like N64 texturing is just about the worst smeary thing you've ever looked at. PSX stuff, that jittery, awful stuff with the original PlayStation is really, really bad. A necessary step in the evolution of video games, no doubt, but this really awkward moment that I don't know if holds up the same or has the same kind of nostalgia tied to it. Certainly there are really good games on that device. There were. Mario 64 is still probably my favorite video game of all time. It blew my mind at the time and changed the way I thought about video games. Zelda did similar things later on with Ocarina of Time. But they look like garbage now. They really, really look bad. And so what happens there is they end up coming out with remasters that look really good. And you're like, oh, yeah, the gameplay's still here, but also I'm not looking at trash all day. And if you really go back and look at that stuff, I think it's hard to go back. That being said, time shifts. It's just like the shifting time thing. Why do we think pixel art is cool now? Well, there's enough time has passed, and we think it's cool still. So we make new games based on it, and it's great, and everyone loves it. Half of Steam is some sort of pixel roguelike, which is amazing because I love that stuff. But then will we have a time, let's say in the next 5-10 years, where we shift ahead again and we look back so fondly on the 3D transition that finally that stuff doesn't look like somebody pooped?
I really don't think
and then
so.
maybe into it again. I don't know.
We've talked about this on numerous occasions, you know, that jump to 3D and how just awful everything looks in that era. And I don't think we're going to look back on it fondly at all.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, possibly. Do you guys think that? I don't know. I mean, in a way, it bums me out because it heralded this important change, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And especially for Nintendo. Nintendo was like, all right, big, weird plastic shape. It's got a number on it. We're not giving it a regular name. It's got these 4 ports, which is cool, but these controllers look like Batman had a bad dream. Like, it's just so weird. But at the same time, they introduced analog control to a mass audience, and that was stunning. Like, that changed the way the business moved forward. So there's so many things they did right, but then they were like, well, we're going to go cartridges, not digital media. What's funny is the world has gotten completely away from optical discs and moved back to digital or a solid state, essentially, for this stuff, which is, it's so funny how that switched to me. Like, I remember people going, oh, Nintendo, you're so behind the times. I can't believe you're not going to put this on CD. And everybody was praising what Sony was doing. It's the opposite now. Like, the complete opposite. I don't even want cartridges. I want freaking download it, put it on an SD card or whatever kind of storage I've got on that thing. Like, that's the best innovation of our lives. It's the greatest thing ever. And you don't lose anything in terms of music or sound or any of that. That stuff's all there. I mean, I was just playing ESO over here earlier today. That game's 80 gigabytes. Got all this audio and dialogue and all this stuff. And to me, it's just no big deal. It's on this like 4 terabyte drive. It's like this tiny thing, no big deal. And the N64 had kind of weird music, and it didn't sound exactly right because it wasn't optical disc quality, blah, blah, blah. But that transition is so historically important, yet so ugly and not as fun as we remember it.
And if you go back...
I'm very curious how that all pans out.
If you go back and not having played a Nintendo 64 in a while, and go back and use that controller when we're so used to the last... 20 years of the dual analog, and then you go back to that single analog controller, it's like...
It sucks.
It's awful.
It really sucks, because I played through Ocarina of Time again a couple of months ago, and it was a struggle to get used to that thing again.
Yeah.
I replayed it on the 3DS with the... whatever version they called that. I forget what they called it, but they basically remastered it.
Yeah.
And that was great. Like, it actually felt pretty good, but they changed some stuff. Like, the interface changed, and that device only has a single analog stick, and it's a goofy, weird little disc thing anyway. But, it was like the gameplay was always there. Like, it was always there. It was always amazing, and it will always hold up. It's just the limitations of the tech at the time. Like, if you just go look at a screenshot right now, you're just like, oh, I don't remember this. This is really bad. And part of it was because you were playing it on a 19-inch CRT, big fat TV or whatever, over RF connectors, and you just didn't care because that was video games. And we've just come so far so quickly that we forget how rough some of those edges were. All that being said, I mean, jump into the GameCube, PS2, and the original Xbox era. Suddenly you're like, oh, okay, right move. We've done, we're past the awkward stage. Puberty's over. Yeah. We can now just move into young adult life as video games go, and the whole world changed. And now, I mean, I still think we're breathing those fumes. That's still kind of where we're at. We've just improved the fidelity, certainly past that, but we're still in the same zone as we were with that launch. But yeah, I don't know. I find that it's a fascinating conversation about what historic role or nostalgic role should the PlayStation 1 and the N64 really play in our lives? And I don't think we know the answer yet.
Well, I think the PlayStation 1 is probably just going to go be fossilized, because nobody wants that console, first of all, because why would you get that if you can go get a PlayStation 2 and have backwards compatibility and be able to play better games? So, PlayStation 1s are just, nobody wants those consoles now.
No, It was so huge at the time. I just, like I said, I don't think enough time has passed. Here's the other problem too: is optical drives and the guts of those things don't hold up over time the way solid state cartridge based stuff does. And as much as we had to blow out a cartridge just to get it to work on a SNES or whatever, that's still preferable to an optical drive that just gives out because you can only spin for so long and your life is over. So in a lot of ways, they're not going to hold up long term for that reason either. N64 has maybe an advantage in that regard, but what I hope for, as much as I was just talking smack about emulation, what I hope the long-term prognosis is that we emulate everything so that it's as accurate down to the errors and the goofs and the stuff as possible. So like as raw, accurate as possible, as a duplicate of what it was originally. So at the very least, moving forward, we have a historical archive that can be accessed anytime down the road, and we never forget where we were in this medium.
Yeah.
That's really important to me. And so whether that comes from the companies who make these games or it comes from the underground who wants to see these things preserved, I don't actually care who does it. I just want to make sure they do, so that, you know, I mean, I want to have grandkids one day, and when I do, I would like to, you know, say, well, let me fire up this Mario Kart that originally appeared in 1991, and you know, I want to go there, and I want to do it in a way that feels real and accurate. And
speaking of that, do you think that it would be feasible for, say, you know, a bunch of people get together and come up with some sort of like a gaming museum sort of thing, where you have this online place you go and you could play every single game, say from, you know, the very first video game ever made, like, you know, Pong type of game, or up to, you know, a certain year, let's say like 2010, like just let's pretend it's the year 2030, and up to like 2020 you can go to this certain website or whatever, and you could play any of these games for free just because they are preserved. All the ROMs have been preserved and available in one spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're heading there. In fact, there's already great inroads being made by the archive.org project, which has, you go there now, you get any DOS game you can imagine, all emulated and running and available, and they do it as a historic preservation. It's not there to say, we pirated all these games, come play them. Because for the most part, a lot of old DOS stuff is kind of garbage, to be honest, but it's all there and available. They've had some resistance from that initially. Then people kind of saw the wisdom of it. I mean, their goal is not to pirate video games. Their goal is to preserve them. Yeah. And just like it's their goal to preserve web pages and preserve audio and video content. So you can go there and find crazy wartime newsreels from 1930 that are just unbelievably cool and lost to the world if it wasn't for what they're doing. You can't find that stuff on YouTube. You can't find it in any other major source. So they're already doing this to a degree. The question is, will they go further? And I don't see why not. Like the technology that allows, at least right now, a browser to accurately give you a game of Quake is not, it's not that crazy to think that in 10 years that same technology or the evolution of that same technology wouldn't give you, you know, I'm trying to think of an example, Breath of the Wild, and just in the same way. And so I think that it'll always be a little behind the cutting edge of where the business is releasing video games, but I do think it will catch up and keep up. All that being said, you know there are going to be legal battles. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, especially, you know, what you guys were talking about, I think it was on Current Geek this week, about the current copyright laws, and, you know, how ridiculously long those copyright laws are. Do you think if we come to some sort of, you know, fixing these copyright laws to where you can, you know, people can innovate on things that are, you know, copyright, like, don't get me wrong, you know, I was a musician. I've got songs that were, you know, registered with ASCAP and BMI and everything, and there's copyrights with that. But, you know, at a certain point, like, I think at the end of my lifetime, that stuff should be up for grabs unless there's some sort of, you know, beforehand stuff worked out. But, you know, as far as like video games and stuff, I really think that stuff should be a little more lax so that they can do things like preservation and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you guys may even discuss some of this with Tom Merritt, I'm not sure, but he's always one to talk to about copyright law and where it's at today and where it used to be. And we were just talking the other day about how Steamboat Willie, Disney's original character that eventually sort of morphed into Mickey Mouse, will be up for the current copyright law, which is lifetime plus 90 years, which is stupid.
Yeah. By the way.
So if you live to be 190 years before a public domain, it's crazy. But anyway, the idea is that in 2030, I think it is, that becomes public domain, unless Disney, a mega giant, biggest corporation in the entertainment world ever in the history of ever, decides to push for more stringent laws about them retaining ownership of that or extending the time or something like that. They're not expected to, but it's definitely a conversation people are having right now about, well, that's not that far away. What does that mean? And, that affects a lot of things. So my point is that stuff sort of trickles down to all kinds of media. Video games are certainly not immune to this. I think the big difference is what video game companies have learned, certainly Nintendo has learned this recently, is that people are willing to still pay money for these old experiences. And because they're willing to spend that money, they have no interest in seeing those games go public domain anytime soon. Yeah. So the way I would like to see this go down, the easy thing and the thing they're okay with is for a physical brick and mortar museum to have 20 NESs playing Duck Hunt and a placard explaining when it came out, who designed it, and why it's rad. Like, that's okay with them now. Yeah. They're totally cool with that. What they're not cool with, and I don't know how this is going to change, honestly. So I'm a little negative on this, but what they don't want is archive.org to have a Nintendo library of old games that people can go and play at will. Like right now, I was looking at archive again. I can go into the Vectrex section or the Atari 2600 section, the ZX Spectrum section, DOS game section. They have all this stuff in here. Every Vectrex game is here and playable right now. And it's not downloadable, or maybe it is actually. Hold on. Is it? No, it's not. I was curious about that because I don't know what you'd play on. And there's emulators for all this stuff anyway. So if you're already doing this illegally, you're already doing it. But what would be nice is if, like what Archive's doing, we could get to a place where we are cool with the idea of these things being a historical record, but in a way that everybody can access it and not have to drive to some museum in Chicago to get there. And I'm not that optimistic that will happen because they've seen that they still can make money. If they didn't think they could make money, they wouldn't have had the top selling console of last year was an NES Classic. Yeah, that sold more. They sold more of those than anything else. That's insane. And they sold out. They were gone. And the SNES experienced the same kind of sales, and they've continued to make them. So we're the problem almost. We're swiping these things up saying, yes, we're still willing to pay for your really old stuff. Yeah. And they're going, then good, we're never going to let go of it. So I don't know, man. I don't have a lot of confidence in that future, to be honest.
And the irony's not lost on me either with the copyright stuff that Disney made their empire off of public domain properties. And now their stuff is about to come up as public domain stuff. And they're fighting to keep it under, their copyright for it. So that just, I don't know, that seems kind of weird to me.
Yeah. We'll see. That's true of a lot of things, though, music or whatever. But people want to hang on to it forever.
We can go ahead and start the show now. And
this is really good, deep conversation about cool stuff. And you have a full outline.
No, I'm just kidding. Actually, we got a couple of news stories we're going to blow through real quick. And let's go ahead and move into that. And this is this week's news. Derek, I'm going to let you cover this first story since you're the Game Boy guy here.
Cool. So this comes to us from BGR.com. Hyperkin plans to revive the Game Boy before Nintendo has a chance. The market for retro gaming hardware has been around for ages, but no one quite knew how massive it could be until Nintendo came out with the NES Classic in 2016, alluding to what we were talking about earlier. The miniature console sold out immediately, and every time it came back in stock, it was gone as quickly as it had arrived. Nintendo followed it up with the SNES Classic in 2017, and despite having more stock, still managed to sell it at virtually every retailer. Taking advantage of the wave of enthusiasm for old-school hardware, gaming peripheral maker Hyperkin announced at CES 2018 this week that it is working on an updated version of Nintendo's Game Boy that will actually play original Game Boy games in addition to featuring countless improvements over the original hardware. Let's see. As far as the Ultra Game Boy looks, there are significant changes. First of all, there's a third dial that allows you to adjust the backlit LCD display, which wasn't possible on the first several Game Boy models. If you want an authentic Game Boy experience, though, you can turn off the backlight altogether. The built-in battery has a 6-hour lifespan. a USB-C charging port, stereo speakers, as well as right and left audio output connectors.
So
it's planning to launch. One last thing, it's planning to launch the Ultra Game Boy before the end of the summer for a price point under $100.
I don't know. We've talked about this before. I don't see the point in this. Not with smartphones. Why you could just do this on a smartphone.
Well, you could, but here's the problem: you can't plug a cartridge into a smartphone. So their one up on this one is here's a form factor where the actual cartridges go in there. There's no software built into the thing, so they're skirting the legal fight with Nintendo on this by doing that. But you're absolutely right. Like my phone could more than happily play everything that ever existed, pre 1995 and then beyond. And they're never going to do it because the only way to get software on there is to load it on there. It would have to be pretty skeezy. It would have to be Google Play only, first of all, because Apple's way over controlling when it comes to what gets released on their device. And it would all have to be side-loaded ROMs. They'd never be able to just go to the store and get them. It'd be an app. In fact, I'm sure this already exists. There's probably some emulator on there now, and then people are letting, you can side-load ROMs on there and play it that way. So I think this is already happening. This is just somebody cashing in on a hardware grab, and that's fine. But I also don't want to go scour the world for a bunch of NES cartridges. I would really much rather wait for Nintendo to release a device.
Yeah.
Or you know what's better? Hey, Nintendo, I have a Switch right here. That thing's really capable. Why don't you give me everything you've been putting on all these other extra pieces of plastic? Put them all on there. That's my new device. Done.
Yeah.
I'll pay money. I'll pay Nintendo the money for the games. I don't have a problem with that. Like $5 a pop. Here you go. I don't have a problem, but I don't want to go buy another one, another little fake rip-off Game Boy.
Yeah, we just had a Skype crash. Derek's Skype crashed out, so let me see if I can add him back to the call here.
Oh, no worries.
Come on,
no worries.
Gotta love Skype.
We started using Discord pretty exclusively lately, and it's been real good for us.
Yeah,
I'm liking it.
We used it for a Pop Culture Palette, but it crashed on us last week when we were trying to use
it. Really?
We had to skip over halfway through the show. We had to use Skype.
Oh, weird. I haven't had any problems like that, but I don't know. Maybe there's some other issues, but the video's been really good. The audio's been great. I've been very happy with it.
There he is. I think Derek's back.
I think I'm back.
But I have another story here, and this is I just added this. It's kind of weird. From, what is this, NintendoLife.com. Woman loves Tetris so much he's going to marry her copy.
This is the best story we've ever talked about on this show, by the way.
Hurricane, let's see, a 20-year-old Nurul. Oh, this is all right up your alley, Scott, trying to say this name here. Nurul Majabin Hassan from Florida prefers to go by the name Fractal Tetris Hurricane, and her adopted moniker might give you an idea of the game she loves above all others, classic Russian puzzler Tetris. She identifies as objectum sexual, meaning she's physically and emotionally attracted to inanimate objects rather than actual people. She describes growing up attracted to everything from treadmills to GPS devices before entering a relationship with the legendary puzzle romp in September of 2016. She plays up to 12 hours a day on her smartphone and her Game Boy and plans to marry her copy of the game in front of friends and family once she graduates. I don't even know what to say about this.
Here's the thing. So this is where I can actually bring a little light on this. My sister's a psychologist, and we have discussed this very thing. This situation where some people, the only way you could classify them is they're into stuff, not people. Yeah. So, they're attracted to whatever it may be. And the one example I talked to my sister about was somebody who was really into photo booth machines. Like not taking the photos, not being in the photo, none of that. It's just the machine. And she found one in particular she really liked, and I think in that case married the machine or did some ceremony that sort of, committed to the machine or whatever. So that part is less strange to me than specifically it being Tetris.
Yeah.
it's this cartridge, and it's also that thing ain't gonna last forever, by the way. And I guess no marriage does. But I don't know what to think of it either. That is a very specific kind of attraction. And I don't know that I would be so into Tetris that I could ever feel that way. But hey, whatever, you know, not do what you got to do. Well, that's wrong music. That's Angry Birds. I was getting confused.
Can't think of any game that I would be that attracted to that I would want to marry it, other than Ninja Gaiden, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably spend more time with World of Warcraft than your average marriage stays together. But I never once thought, you know, we ought to consummate this and make this real. Let's go to Vegas and, you know, go to the Whitechapel or something like that. Never happened once in my experience.
Yeah. But one more thing we needed to talk
fantastic.
about is Sega drops a curious teaser for incoming announcement next week. All it did was it put on Twitter, it was a picture of a light bulb, and it says January 16th. And that was it. Nobody knows what it's about. Everybody's kind of speculating whether it's a PC release of Bayonetta, hid clues that the cult favorite Vanquish would come to the platform later on. Some people are talking about maybe it has something to do with the re-release of what was it called? Not the Sega CD, not the Sega CD, but the Saturn has something to do with the Saturn. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to think about it.
Interesting.
Well, there's nothing in the image that's super telling. Like, it's literally just a light bulb. I'm looking really close at it here. In fact, I've zoomed it way in, and I don't see like weird shadows in it or any kind of like shapes that'll give anything away. And because that is kind of I thought that's kind of maybe what they were doing there. I have a theory if you guys want to hear what I think it is.
Sure.
I think we're getting a Dreamcast Mini. That's what I think it is. I think it's a tiny Dreamcast. It'll be front loaded with all of Sega's games that they had at the time, Jet Set Radio and all those, you know, stuff, the Sonic games and all that. And they'll make deals with like the original Soul Calibur people, which I guess is Namco or whoever, and they'll end up releasing on the heels of this popularity boom a stripped down, preloaded, you know, mini version of the Dreamcast, and it would shock me if that's not it. I'll bet you money that ends up being it.
That's actually a pretty.
That would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jumping on the Nintendo Mini bandwagon.
They could kill one bird with one stone. Wait. Sorry. Many birds with one stone here. They could say, here's a bunch of Dreamcast stuff, but then also guess what? We put Streets of Rage and half a dozen other really popular Genesis titles on here, and there's even some old Master System games. Like, they could really go crazy with it, make it a single device, sell it for $100, and it would go like hotcakes. I think it would do really well.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I think that would be an awesome thing to do.
But we also have a little segment coming up now called This Month in Video Game History. On January 24th of 1984, Apple Inc. announces the original 128K floppy disk only Macintosh. Did anybody have this computer back in the day?
No, but my parents were too cheap. But we had the Apple IIe leading up to that, and they would never let me play games on it because my dad was sure I was going to destroy the keyboard.
Yeah, we talked about the Apple IIe last week, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we did. I did not own a Macintosh either. My first computer was a Hewlett Packard, I think. Might have been a bit before that.
Was it a Packard Bell? Tell me it was a Packard Bell, because those were garbage.
It might have been.
Yeah, I had one too. They were not good.
No, they were not.
At the time, whatever. How was I going to play Age of Empires or whatever the hell I wanted to put on there? But I would have taken whatever. But man, we've come a long way.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
In January of 1985, Konami releases, and forgive me for butchering the title, Ye Are Kung Fu, which lays the foundations for modern fighting games.
I don't remember this at all.
I do remember this, but mainly because I bought it on another collection. It was a Konami collection that came out for, I forgot what device it was. This was a few years ago, so it must have probably been maybe it was PC. But anyway, it was a bunch of Konami stuff. Maybe in Game Boy. Game Boy Advance is where I got it, I think. But anyway, it was a bunch of old Konami games all collected. It included like Miss Pac-Man, some of the bigger titles, and then they had this on there. And it was this weird fighting game where the characters would leap way in the air. They were very small sprites, and it was the way that the thing was shot was like shot as if it was a camera. Now I'm talking your language there. But like at the bottom of the screen, you see the two guys real low, and then when they jump, they'd go way to the top of the portrait style screen, and then come crashing down on each other. And I found it really hard to play and super weird, but I totally get the lineage, and I understand why people revere it. It's a pretty nifty little example of early fighting games for sure.
Cool.
Sweet.
Also in January of 1985, Commodore releases their final 8-bit computer, the Commodore 128. Never had one of these, but I did have a Commodore 64.
Yeah. Well, you had the popular one then. Yeah. So the 64 was a big success for them. Everything beyond that kind of petered out and nothing ever came of it, and they went away. But the Commodore 64 is a legend. Mm-hmm. And the 128, I don't think I even knew someone who had that. I think by then people had moved on. People were using Amigas if you were looking for high-end crazy stuff. I think Commodore's best days were behind them.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind finding a working Amiga if I could get my hands on one.
Mm-hmm.
In January of 1994, Mega Man X is released in the United States.
What is this
Mega
Man you speak of? I've never heard of it.
I mean, we've never spoke about this thing on this podcast before.
I never really was a Mega Man guy, so you guys would have to tell me if 10 or X was all that.
Jason's the Mega Man guy. I've briefly played the first one, and that's about my extent with Mega Man.
Well, if I'm gonna recommend one, I say just go with Mega Man 2, the best of the entire series. So that's the one to play, Mega Man 2.
All right.
Especially if you like games, if you like games like Cuphead, things like that. Cuphead don't have shit on Mega Man.
Well, I mean, Cuphead owes its lineage to that, right? Like the really hard side-scrollers of the day, which Mega Man 1 and 2 were definitely that.
Yeah, but all these kids now are talking about Cuphead so hard. I'm like, no! Go back and play those old NES games, man. I used to have bruises on my leg from when I would get so mad and start punching myself in the leg.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And also, January 1st of 1995, Tamsoft SCEA releases Battle Arena Toshinden for the PlayStation, one of the first fully 3D games.
I played that. I played the hell out of that. I got it day one and thought it was amazing. Sorry, I just put an image in the doc from Mega Man doc, if that's interesting. You know,
Steve
did that forever ago. But anyway, I love Battle Arena Toshinden. It was something else. Like that was at the time just mind blowing, and you were like, forget Street Fighter. That's dumb. Look at this. This is the new hotness. And I think its best modern example of that would have been the Soul Calibur games. I think those took that idea and took it even further, where it's like sort of weapon-based fighting. But now, who cares? That game's not good. I played it recently, emulated. It's terrible, actually. So
I was gonna
Battle
say
Arena
Street Fighter.
Toshinden, its new box art should say, not as good as you thought it was.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2 still holds up. Go back and look at those old PlayStation 1 fighting games, and it's like, whoa! That's gross.
Yeah. Yeah. And 2 was also bad, by the way. They made a sequel and it was not good.
And to close out this month in video game history, on January 13th, 1995, Taito releases Bust a Move for the SNES. I remember playing this game when the dentist office I used to go to as a kid had this arcade machine, and it had two different games on it, and this was one of them. And I never played it for the actual console, but I love playing the arcade version of it. It's simple, but it's fun.
It's stupid that they changed the name. So in Japan, it was something else. Here they called it Bust a Move because they thought it would sound cooler for 90s kids.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with the game. Like, it sounds like a dancing game or something. You shoot little bubbles up and try to match colors and pop the bubbles. The fact they called it Bust a Move it's so dumb. And the art cover for that was hideous, but I had a Saturn version. I bought it at Ultimate Electronics. No, Incredible Universe before they caved and went away. Brought that home, and to this day, that is the game that if my wife and I are 100% devoted to each other, and we have been since the day we met. But I'll tell you what, if there was ever a chance for divorce, it's while playing head-to-head Bust a Move. Super bad news, that thing. Whew.
Ooh, man.
Very competitive.
But Derek, you talk about that was in your dentist office. You had a cool dentist, man. Like when I went to the dentist as a kid, all he had was like 10-year-old Southern Living magazines in there or something like that.
The cool thing was,
that's terrible.
The good thing for me was that the wait took forever, so I just got the chance to play that. And they also had they had a Super Nintendo at one point, because I remember playing Super Mario World at the dentist's office too. I'm like, no, I can push my appointment back. I'll keep playing.
Yeah.
They have our dentist up here has they continue on, except now it's a 65-inch TV mounted to the wall in HD. They're playing a PlayStation 4 preloaded with a ton of downloaded games and 4 controllers in there, and a bunch of kids, forgetting that their mouths are about to be shot with needles. It's great.
Yeah, I go to the dentist now, and he has the TV on in the actual room. You go in, and they'll have like Fox News on, and I'm just like, just knock me out, do it, drill me into the brain. I don't care.
Yep. Do it now.
Let's go ahead and talk about books, Derek, before we go into our review for this evening.
Sure. So for you, the listeners of the Nerd Cave Retro podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. I'm pulling up the full title of the book I've been reading because it's kind of long. It's called, I've been in kind of like a, motivational speaking type mood. So I've been reading this book called No is a 4-letter word, How I Failed Spelling but Succeeded in Life by Chris Jericho, who is a pro wrestler, rock star, author. It's I think like a 20-chapter book, and each chapter is some type of tip for succeeding in your career and in life, and he tells stories that relate to that tip. So it's not a very long book. It's only like 5 hours long, and I'm about halfway through it. But so far, it's really good. But Audible has a ton of other books. They have fiction, nonfiction. If you're a gamer and if you're listening to this podcast, I would assume that you are. They have books from the Halo series, Gears of War, Mass Effect. Any genre you can think of, Audible has. And if you're always on the go like I am, Audible's a great service to have to be able to continue to read books without having to actually sit down and read a physical copy. And to do that, just go to audibletrial.com/nerdcave. Again, that's audibletrial.com/nerdcave for your free audiobook download and 30-day free trial.
God, that music takes me right back, man.
Oh, doesn't it? I'm glad you went with the original version. It's like a popular one that was remade. It was either the late 90s or early 2000s that most everyone knows, but that is the original. This week, we're going to be talking Mortal Kombat, one of, if not the most iconic fighting games ever made in the history of gaming. It's an arcade fighting game developed and published by Midway in 1992 as the first title in the Mortal Kombat series. It was subsequently released by Acclaim Entertainment for nearly every home video game platform of the time. Now, most people know the arcade version, and we've talked about the controversies with it getting put on Nintendo and taking out the blood and all that stuff. And my first experience to this game personally was the Super Nintendo version. This was the game that every kid my age had to play because it was like it didn't have blood in it, but it was still considered fairly adult for its time. So this came out in 92, so I was 6 or 7 at the time. So it's like, oh, this is the cool game to have. And it introduced so many cool things. Like it had, really cool characters like Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, the famous hidden character that looked like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, but had a green outfit instead of blue or yellow. You had Liu Kang, Raiden, which is a very popular one as well. But I know we were talking, Jason, before we got started. You didn't remember that this game actually had a story mode in it.
Yeah. Well, I was never really a big fighting game fan. Like, I liked Street Fighter. And I remember the restaurant that I worked at around this time, around 93, we had a Mortal Kombat 2 machine in the back. It was a pizza restaurant. We had the cocktail Miss Pac-Man, and we had a Mortal Kombat 2. And I was a beast with Baraka, man. I was really good with that. But I never really liked playing fighting games like on the home console or anything. So I never really played too much of the Mortal Kombat. Like I said, I played Street Fighter a little bit, but I don't think I've ever purchased a fighting game just to have a fighting game.
Oh my gosh. I was first in line for MK when it hit the Genesis. We went in early and everything, did a pre-order. The news came. We got on camera for some morning news show because they were like, controversial game, Mortal Kombat with the bloody this and that, because that was the huge deal around it at the time.
Yeah.
And I loved the MK series. That was my fighting game. And to this day, that's more interesting to me than any other fighting game. And I'm not even that much into fighting games, but there's something about Mortal Kombat where it's like, yeah, this is dark, this is twisted, it goes to places, they tell a weird story. That to me is more than just the competitive scene or whatever. And even there they do okay these days. So yeah, MK, man, lots of fond memories. I mean, 2 is where it was at for me. I also liked Baraka a lot, and I could play him and Jax until my face was red. I love those two. But that series is so great and so dumb and great and dumb.
Well, yeah, you look back at the controversy now, and it's so quaint. I miss those days.
It really is. Well, what's interesting is that, this is one of those franchises that, when you think of video games, it's like one of the first, 5 games that you'll think of, because it spawned 2 movies. The first one, I actually, for what it was, I didn't think was that bad. Second one's terrible. But it actually did, if you guys haven't watched the Mortal Kombat Legacy web series, it's really, really good. It's made so really well.
Yeah.
I wish they would make a movie like that. It would be awesome.
Or, you know what? I thought it was, in fact, at the time I remember seeing it because there's some pretty big names in it. Some BSG actors and some other stuff. And I thought, oh, they're doing a new series or something. So I thought it was all teasers for a TV show. That was back in 2010 or 11? I think you could do it now, and there's a million ways and places you could put it. And in our new world of Hulu, Netflix, and everything else, there is a way to make a proper MK series come to life, or at the very least, like you say, a movie. And it doesn't need to be in theaters, and it doesn't need to have the budget that people think it does. Like, they could really go places. I am with you 100%.
Well, and they could even do what they did with Castlevania. They could do basically like a trial, and then if that works, then you do either a Netflix film or you do a series. And let's see, it was originally released in April 11th of 2011. There were 2 seasons and 19 episodes. So for anybody who's listening who hasn't watched that, definitely go on YouTube and find it, because it's really good. And I remember the guy who directed all these episodes, they were saying that they were going to give him control over making an actual Mortal Kombat movie. But that was back in 2013, and nothing's came of it ever since. But Mortal Kombat is just one of those franchises that it transcends video games, because you think of Mortal Kombat and almost everyone has some type of Mortal Kombat story. And I remember when they did the remake for Xbox 360 back in, I think, 2010 or 2011, and me and a group of 5 or 6 friends were just geeking out over it, and we went to the midnight release of it and went back to one of my friend's house and stayed up all night just beating the crap out of each other. So it's a really fun series.
Well, the good news is, I was just looking this up, Collider.com last year, 2017, There is a script being passed around Hollywood right now, an original Mortal Kombat reboot, saying it reads like a hard R Avengers, and sweet. I'm all in. Sign me up. I'm ready. My body.
That's what
I
was going to say.
I'll be there day one.
If you're going to do a Mortal Kombat movie, do the Thor Ragnarok route and just go in whole hog with just silliness and just make it so over the top, and you'll get away with it. Don't try to be all earnest with it. Try to write this, epic story. Just go in and just make it what it is, and I think it'll do well.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be such a fun time at the theater.
Oh man.
But let's see, the story of the game, it focuses on the journey of the monk Liu Kang to save Earth from the evil sorcerer Shang Tsung, ending with their confrontation in the tournament known as Mortal Kombat. What was your guys' go-to character? I know you guys mentioned Baraka. What was he your guys' go-to character for the series?
Yeah, Sub-Zero actually, and who's the other one? Scorpion. They were as much as they were like mascots of the series, because they sort of were. They were also the guys I would always go to. They probably appealed to me the most, and then I kind of branched out with two more. But at the end of the day, even now, I'll play a modern one, and I always pick one of those guys. I want to shoot. Listen, who doesn't want to throw a chain with a hook on the end of it across the thing and say, "Get over here"?
Get over here.
Exactly. Come here. Like, he was just a badass in every way, and I would play again right now if I had him in front of me.
Yeah, well, even on that Legacy series, the dynamic between the Scorpion and Sub-Zero characters were awesome, and Sub-Zero was my guy, all in.
Yeah.
I always went Baraka, but either him or my backup was always Raiden. I always played Raiden.
Raiden was a good one too.
I always tried to play Sub-Zero and Scorpion, because they were the cool, characters to play. But I never, like I said, I never was a real big fighting game fan. And Baraka was the easiest one to kind of figure out, his special moves. And I'm not a special move figure outer kind of guy. That's just not my thing. I never can get special moves in a game. Never have been able to.
Which is kind of that whole thing. I mean, that's fighting games in a nutshell, and that's why I think I didn't love the genre as much either. I think that's why Mortal Kombat clicked for me more than others, because it's a lot of simple stuff. It's, a lot of cool uppercuts and timing, and moves mattered, but they were kind of like multiple characters across the board would have similar moves. So it's not like you had to relearn something every time. And I just felt like it was just easier to get into. Whereas Street Fighter was like, all right, I need to know everything about this freaking fool. And I hate it.
I was just never, I've never actually even played a Street Fighter game before, which is crazy. It's Mortal Kombat was just, that was my fighting game growing up. And then, Smash Brothers came along in the late 90s, and that was it for me. Smash Brothers now is my favorite, fighting game franchise. But let's see, the legacy and the reception of Mortal Kombat. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded Mortal Kombat the title of Most Controversial Game of 1993. See, in 1995, Daily News wrote, original Mortal Kombat video game, which debuted in 1992, is a combination of storyline, character, and mega violence, soon made it a hit worldwide. And the controversy engendered, I think is the word, by its blood-gushing special effects only served to boost its popularity. Let's see. In 2004, readers of Retro Gamer voted Mortal Kombat as the 55th top retro game of all time. Electronic Gaming Monthly, in its original scores, gave the Genesis version an 8.25 out of 10 and SNES a 7.25. GamePro gave it a 5 out of 5. Games Master gave it an 81%. And Mega gave it an 82%. So
I like here
for the most part, pretty high reviews.
It says in 2006, IGN named the SNES port as the 8th worst arcade to console conversion. I didn't think it was that bad, other than the blood being changed.
Yeah, you got to remember that the conversion itself was, I mean, it looked good. It looked better than the Genesis one. The Genesis one had missing frames of animation. It sounded kind of bad. but it had the blood, right? Like it had the tone. And the SNES version had all the sweat, fake, whatever that was, coming out of people. And I think that's enough because it damages the tone of the series. I think that's enough for them to maybe call it that. That's maybe a little harsh, but I've seen some pretty bad ports in my life. I mean, did they forget about Pac-Man for the Atari 2600? That was a garbage poo.
That is a game of which we do not speak.
It's barely a game. It's just an abomination. So I take issue with them calling that out, but I guess I kind of understand it too.
I still remember being like a 6-year-old kid trying to play Pac-Man on the our Atari 2600 and just going, what the hell is this? This is the worst thing I've ever played, ever.
It's so bad. Yeah, everyone gives E.T. all that heat because it was so bad you could get stuck and never get out. You got buried in the New Mexico desert. Like all those things make that a very fun story. But I'm telling you, for my money, it was Pac-Man as the abomination. That thing is garbage.
And did you know this, that they made more copies of Pac-Man than they had actual Atari 2600 consoles out there because they were so sure that Pac-Man was going to be a system seller. And that's why...
It sold okay, right? Like, in the end, I think that game did all right financially, but nobody was singing its praises, I don't think.
No, but it was one of the games. I mean, everybody kind of blames E.T. as the game that caused the 1983 crash, but it really started with Pac-Man.
Yeah, for sure.
One last little review about it. Let's see. In 2012, Time magazine named it one of the 100 greatest video games of all time. And in 2013, it was ranked as the best arcade game of the 1990s.
That's high.
So pretty high praise. I mean, I definitely think like it's probably not my all-time favorite fighting game, but I think it's one of those games that put video gaming on the map in the 90s. So I definitely respect its place, in the video game world. If I'm to give it a number score, because I haven't been able to find a physical copy here in town, so I just downloaded an emulator and played it earlier today just to, kind of get a feel for the game and see if it still holds up. And it still plays pretty well. So I would give it I'd give it a solid 8. Yeah, is what I would give it.
That's where I'd be. I'd apply it to the whole series as well. I think it's been pretty consistent that way. There were some dips in the 2000s, but yeah. And also, I think it's almost impossible to think of a more controversial game in the 90s, maybe ever. Like if you had to do a list of most controversial games ever made, I think that one's right up there. I mean, you could talk about the hot coffee thing with GTA San Andreas. You could talk about lots of stuff. But in the end, that San Andreas stuff is like out in full motion in GTA 5. It's not. They didn't stop doing that.
Yeah. It
was just controversial because up to that point, nobody had sort of pushed those limits. So MK, I mean, that was a lasting impact, and it's still gross, man. Those new MK games are gross.
Yeah,
they're really gross. So I think it deserves the title. It's the most controversial video game of all time, certainly in a mainstream way. I'm sure there are plenty of people upset about, I don't know, what was that guy, Leisure Suit Larry or freaking weird C games with like, there was a game with a naked sheriff where he used his wiener to shoot at you.
I remember that.
But those were small fringy things. This was mainstream, partially responsible for the self-regulating of the industry and a rating system being developed. I mean, parents screaming and people threatening to sue game makers and game publishers and stores out of existence if they even thought about carrying it. Like, it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And a good game, it turns out.
Like I said, I've never really been a big fighting game fan, but if they were to come out with a Mortal Kombat series for Hulu or Netflix or something, I would watch it just because I think the characters are cool. Like, I still like the first movie, even as cheesy as it is. The second one's an affront to humanity. But, the first one's still
a I've seen a lot of movies on FilmSack. Easily my most disappointing, most awful thing I've seen is Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and I recommend everyone see it at least once and then never speak of it again.
I don't know how you guys made it through that movie. It's awful. It's one of the worst things ever.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, but that's coming up to the end of the show, and I just want to give a huge thank you to Scott for coming on to the show this week. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys. It was a pleasure being here. I totally enjoyed it, and I think you guys have a cool thing going here. I love talking about retro stuff, and it's a perfect time to be doing it too. There's like such a great resurgence right now, and interest in the history of this stuff, and it's cool that you've got a show that's chronicling that in a pretty cool way. So thank you for having me on. It was my pleasure.
Well, tell everybody all your info before we get out of here, where they can find you at.
Sure. If you are interested in any of the work I'm doing, you can find links to it and for it at frogpants.com. That's where all the podcasts can be found, all the artwork I'm up to, all that kind of stuff. So if you are interested in that, check it out. That's frogpants.com. Or if you just rather hear me ramble on Twitter, I am at Scott Johnson on Twitter. And I talk to people on there too. Like people always say, "Oh God, you're over 100,000 tweets. How's that possible?" And I'm like, I reply to everybody. So if y'all say something, you'll get an answer, even if it's an answer you don't want. I'll still give you one.
And like I said, the Frog Pants stuff, my favorite podcast to listen to. I couldn't live without the morning stream because I fortunately have a job to where I can listen to podcasts all day. And it's definitely the first thing I pop on in the mornings when I get to work. So thank you so much for all the great content.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And Derek, what you got going on this week?
So this upcoming Tuesday on my show, The Derek Diamond Experience, I will be having a debate that I've been looking forward to for the last couple of weeks. Was The Last Jedi really as bad as fans are making it out to be?
You are stepping into hot territory, my friend.
I'll tell a quick story. So two of my friends at work went to see the movie, and they've just been doing nothing but bashing it. And I was like, you know what? I've got a platform where we can discuss this. So we set it up, and yeah, Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. If you want to hear me try to defend The Last Jedi and other people try to bash it, just go to facebook.com/DDiamondPodcast. I've got some other cool shows and roundtables coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to keep up with that, again, go to Facebook, or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DDiamondPodcast.
And a little throwback to last week's episode. This is still making me laugh to this day, and I don't know why. But remember, kids, whenever somebody asks you who runs Bartertown,
Master Blaster runs Bartertown.
I don't know why. That just brings me so much joy. So if you would like to email us, you can email us at nerdcaveretro@gmail.com. We're at nerdcaveretro.com. We're on Instagram and Twitter at nerdcaveretro. You can follow us individually at jfunktastic, at Derek_Diamond, and we're at Facebook at facebook.com/nerdcaveretro. So Derek, tell them what it's all about.
May the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.
Master Blaster runs Bartertown.
You've been listening to a Nerd Cave Network production.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, that was good.
That's good
You know
stuff.
what? You don't even have to play. You can play anything from any of the Mad Max movies, and I get excited.
Well, we talked about Blaster Master last week for the NES, and I had to go in there and tape that out because that just brings me joy every time I hear it.
Yeah,
It's pretty great. That's pretty great. I mean, that movie is the worst of the first three, but it's still, I don't care. George Miller is my hero forever. I forget.
Yeah. It's got its moments.
The best name for a villain though has got to be in the 2015 video game they made, which was like a big open world kind of. I liked it a lot actually, but I love Mad Max, so I'm biased. But it's like it plays out like a post-apocalyptic Assassin's Creed kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. But the main bad guy in there is supposed to be one of Immortan Joe's other sons that you don't see in the movie. in Fury Road. He's off doing other stuff, and his name in this movie is Scrotus. And it's not only the best name ever, but he's got this big horn on his crotch that looks like this giant like horn sticking out. And his name is Scrotus, and he's fantastic. So Master Blaster, cool name, nice name. Immortan Joe, that's all right. Scrotus, that's a guy you don't want to be around.
No.
I'm going to go ahead.
You don't mess with him.
And I'm going to say goodbye to the Twitch people for that, for Scrotus.
Bye, Twitch people.